Welcome to another Vehicle Acquisition Insights conversation. Today, we are once again sitting down with Tom Gregg, CEO of Vehicle Acquisition Network, to help you learn more about the value of VAN and vAuto's Profit Time GPS partnership. I want to jump right in. So first, how are you? Nice to see you. And have you done anything fun this summer so far?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. And I just last week we took the entire family down to Lake of the Ozarks, and we had an awesome time.
Love that. Love that spot. If people aren't familiar, they're missing out. That's a great area. I love that whole part of Arkansas all the way up into Missouri. It's awesome.
Yeah,
Well, today, as we kind of want to pop the hood and talk about your partnership with Van and with the Profit Time GPS, I think the first place I'd like to start is how the partnership between you and Profit Time GPS is benefiting car dealerships. Maybe at the high level, start there.
sure. As we consider, why did Van and vAuto partner? I think I'll start there. So the area of private sellers was a void that vAuto didn't really have an answer for. And so it made sense for vAuto to bring us in to really address a clear, obvious channel that dealers are sourcing cars from and could do a better job and really how that relates to bringing those opportunities inside of vAuto. We've been at this now for going on 12 years. I incorporated the business in January of 13. So coming up on 12 years of exclusively doing nothing but private sellers. So we have the best data that exists in the industry. And so it made sense to really bring Van into the vAuto ecosystem. And as it relates to what is in it for Van with this partnership, what we do is we are now able to obtain really unique insights overlaid on top of all the private seller listings. So when you look at what a dealer has in a given market, we'll look at a market and there'll be thousands of cars that are actively available. And it can be overwhelming for many users or buyers to say, where do I start? And one way to start could be the subjective way. What cars do I like, right? Go after the cars that they think they like, or perhaps what cars just show up that they know they do well with. That's one way to approach it. What doesn't happen, or very rarely, I should say, what rarely happens is a dealer covers the entire market, right? And there's a number of reasons why a dealer is often unable to address all the cars in a market, and I'll get to why. But what we are able to do is with the insights, we can help dealers to focus on the cars that will drive the highest ROI. And how we do this, these unique insights overlaid on top of the private seller listings are two factors that are embedded in vAuto. One is the strategy action. The strategy action is basically a matrix of vehicle segment. So you have small sedan, large sedan, small SUV, and so on by price block. So 0 to 10, 10 to 15, 15 to 20 of the asking price. And this is a strategy that would help a dealer to match what they're stocking relating to what their sales cycle is. So if they've sold a certain number of cars in a given segment and price point over the past 30 or 45 days, whatever they have preset for that, they're able to avoid overstocking or understocking that segment by looking at cars that would have a positive strategy action, which would suggest they should buy cars to fill that. When you look at the market, if a dealer has sold, say, 10 cars that are small SUV between $10,000 and $15,000, but they only stock one, that would mean that they have, over their past 30 days, that they could stock another 9 to stay consistent with their sales cycle. But if they have one, they're only going to be able to sell at max 1. And that's one area, is to look at the strategy action. Where should we stock? Which cars should we stock based on vehicle segment and price point? The second is the stocking grade. So there's 7 attributes that make up the stocking grade. The dealer has the ability to adjust these. They are things like the demand, the interest, the amount of supply that exists in the marketplace, profitability, past success, and a couple others. Market day supply as one more. So that can help a dealer to really dial in. An A would be a car that I would argue the dealer can be highly competitive in their market among their other competitors like Carvana and CarMax. So if a dealer is willing or able to pay up for a vehicle, I would argue that the higher the letter grade and the higher the strategy action, that car, those cars would be ones they should be able to offer more, and they should be able to exit at a higher margin on those vehicles rather than a vehicle that may be a D for whatever reason. Those factors are pointing to a low letter grade and perhaps a negative on the strategy action. Perhaps they're overstocked. So if they overstock in a given segment, what is likely to happen is that segment is going to age. When a vehicle ages, it typically, under normal conditions, that value is going to decline. And if they are going to sell it, it's going to likely be based on price point. They had to discount that car or truck in order to sell it, or perhaps it is a vehicle that has to go to the auction. So for this reason, these unique insights really make it a compelling argument and a way for dealers to really focus on the inventory that's going to drive the highest ROI. And these insights have never been overlaid on top of all a dealer's given private seller market like it is now. And that was really the driving factor for us to partner with vAuto, was to help the mutual dealers that are on specifically profit time. So vAuto has a large number of dealers, and then there's the tier, the newer product, which is a lot of data science behind it, which is profit time, and Van lives within profit time.
So much to unpack in all of what you shared, but I think anyone, especially on the retail side, that spends a lot of time with used vehicle inventory, they're already going to be very familiar with vAuto, and that component of vAuto partnered with your platform for all the reasons why you were just discussing. It just seems like one of the places where dealers, perhaps this is maybe the more slightly advanced version. So they're thinking about vehicle acquisition. They're also understanding that vAuto brings so many used vehicle merchandising and pricing and profitability tools, basically inventory management. But these two pieces, these two business components together seem to do something that it's almost like, Wonder Twin Powers super activate all of these things like strategy action and making sure that you get the highest level of ROI on each vehicle. It just seems it goes to another level. And you were getting into some of those features. Before I move on and ask you some other things, are there anything around those, maybe the special features that you believe that the Van platform kind of brings into this mix that enhances the whole vehicle acquisition process that you wanted to spend any more time on before I move on to another question?
Well, I mean, one aspect to consider is, a lot of dealers don't have somebody dedicated to buying cars from consumers, right? It's human capital, as we talked about last time. It can be expensive. Software is one piece, but usually where the dealer is investing more money is on somebody managing the process.
Yeah.
And not every dealer, in fact, most are not equipped or have somebody dedicated to this process. So you may ask, like, all right, so who's the one that's going to do this? Who's the one that is going to actively engage with the private sellers? And what is unique about the hybrid, the combo of a dealer that is using both Van and vAuto, is we can do some really creative things. And one of those, and the reason I'm pointing out about the dealers that may not have somebody dedicated that has a very robust strategy to engage with a lot of sellers in the market, is that we can do some really cool things like sending just positive or favorable strategy actions and stocking grades into their CRM. So imagine you have a BDC that may not want to go after all the cars in the market or even a large number of cars, but the stones that you want to make sure that your store overturns are the cars that have a positive strategy action and a favorable stocking grade. And we can actually push those to a dealer CRM so that their BDC, if they're going to engage with 5 cars in the day or 4 cars, those are the cars they're going to yield the highest profit. They don't even have to log in to Van or vAuto in order to obtain that information. It can get pushed directly into their CRM. So it's one of the things that we think is really cool that we've been able to build through the partnership of vAuto to provide dealers a really unique way to engage with the cars that are likely to drive the highest ROI.
I like that. How does Van help dealerships expand their brand and increase their own market share through this partnership?
I mean, the way that we've been doing this for years is that we've done a great job with automation. So we automate out, so that depending on the level of service the dealer's on, but our flagship product is called Accelerate, which automates the engagement to private sellers. And I recall one of our close friends and allies, David Long, kind of sharing with us why he started using Van back in 2014. An experience that he had was he would task his team to engage with private sellers in the market. And so they would have this push, this campaign to go out and engage. And then that engagement created a lot of inbound opportunities, which then required them to shift gears to work at the inbound. And then before they knew it, they had to start over with this process again of doing the outbound again. And there was this
Mm.
up and down of activity and results because it was the starting of the engagement and then actually working it. Started the engagement and then working it. And what Van does a great job of doing is automating engagement to private sellers. And we do so consistently. It doesn't have to require anybody to push a button to activate any kind of the aggregation of information. We set it to a schedule. And that schedule works as there are opportunities in the market that allow a dealer to, as you had phrased, to expand their brand within a marketplace. And so we can automate out the engagement to private sellers. And what's also really cool about this is when you think about how many listings are on Facebook, right? Right now, Facebook makes up about 70 to 80% of the market.
Wow.
And if a user or a buyer was to have to comb through every single one of those opportunities looking for phone numbers to text, our system actually grabs that phone number and we can automate engagements to those sellers too. So it's a really unique thing that where the only way that you'd be able to do this is if we had combed the entire market looking for very specific things and automating the engagement. So that allows a dealership to expand their brand and engage with consumers on an automated, consistent, and regular basis.
It's very interesting. I don't know if David is also, I'm guessing that he is a Profit Time user um, along with Van. Curious to know if you have other examples. They don't have to be specific. You don't have to share any customer information that you don't want to, but of Profit Time users that are successfully leveraging the Van platform. I think it's interesting to kind of look at both sides of that as you're sharing all of this information. And just wondered if you have any of those examples in mind of people that are Profit Time users that then the Van component comes in and how it's helping them, I guess, in this inventory management consideration.
Sure. The one that I want to highlight is an Infinity store that we have on the West Coast, and the reason I want to highlight them is because they were the first use case that we did with the example that I provided for you with pushing the favorable stocking grades and the positive strategy actions into the CRM. And they shared with us, like, we like this idea. We need cars. If we're buying cars at the auction, we're paying up for it. And then on top of that, we're paying over $1,000 in fees to buy that car. So if I buy that car, I'm making no money. So we have a need to buy used cars, but we don't have the person to do it. And nor do we intend on allocating the cost of human capital to buy a few cars. They just needed a few cars. So we came up with the solution of why don't we just push these into your CRM so that your BDC can manage these engagements. And we didn't know how it was going to work out because in some cases, the BDCs aren't the most equipped to deal with the private sellers. But we were really pleased to hear that they're buying 5 or 6 cars a month.
Hmm.
And when you consider what this could do for a business, well, the front end of these transactions are often $2,000 to $4,000, and we hear from a lot of our stores that the back end The finance profit is usually $1,000 to $2,000. So when you consider the profit potential with buying cars off of the street times 5 cars, this is a meaningful profit that can make a very big impact. An Infinity store, I don't recall the number of used cars that they were selling overall, but 5 cars of high margin has a very big impact on the bottom line.
Yeah, I can imagine that. You mentioned BDC. I wasn't going to ask this question, but are there dealers that within your network that are successful? It would seem a little, like you mentioned, a little difficult to have the BDC, but I'm just curious if a lot of dealers try that first to establish within the BDC vehicle acquisition at all. It just that was kind of fascinating to me.
Well, it depends on what the goals of the dealers are, right? So if a dealer says, I need to buy 40 cars a month,
Hmm.
having a BDC manage it is going to be tough, right? But we typically say you need to have 1 to 2 buyers if you're seeking 30 to 40 cars a month that are
Hmm.
exclusively dedicated to this process. But if a dealer says, I don't need to buy 20 cars, I just need to buy 5 cars. 5 cars is too few to have somebody dedicated, but it's a reasonable enough goal that a sales team or a BDC can have success doing so. Now, Sean, you asked like how right, like how are these BDCs executing with success? Well, number one, it typically comes with some way of obtaining an efficient offer. Now, that could be a range or a specific penny perfect offer we've heard tossed around in our space,
Hmm.
and then having some way of communicating that out to sellers. So if a BDC agent can access an efficient offer product and then communicate that to the seller, and that offer is an actual one that does correspond with what the dealer actually pays when the seller arrives, certainly we do see dealers having success with their BDCs executing if the components are in place and the right tools are available for efficiency. If they have to tap the used car manager asking for offers, if they were to make appointments inviting everybody to come in, we see a lower correlation of success with those. Typically a lot of frustration.
Mm. It makes sense that it would be more manageable if they weren't trying to acquire a large number of vehicles. I just thought that was interesting because I'm sure that some dealers that want to do that might think, is that a way for us at least to get our feet wet and not have to allocate or go and acquire new resources as far as human capital goes and that type of talent. So interesting. Next thing I want to ask you is actually around live market data. Like, does it? I'm pretty sure it does, and so I'm curious to know what role live market data is playing in the synergy between you guys and Profit Time GPS.
Well, I would point back to the strategy action and stocking grade really as live market data being one component. Another one is just simply our systems. We're actively updating our live market data to be able to obtain the best insights for the stores and then keep that constantly updated. And the combination of the two of having the most up to date inventory that's live in a given market combined with live market insights that are updated every single day. So the insights that we're getting back are updated daily. So the dealer knows that if the strategy action is favorable or the stocking grade, that's current information.
Yeah, it's very interesting. The automation features are it's another area that I wanted to ask you about. Like, how are Van's automation features reducing the amount of time that dealers are spending with contacting and responding to the vehicle sellers?
Yeah, great question, and one that I love because the answer is it's a lot of time. So when you consider the consistency of automation over needing people to do activities that are mundane, tedious, repetitive, and can be automated, there's a massive lift because it gets done. And it gets done without taking somebody away from an activity that could be much more valuable, which is engaging with people. And we prefer to automate the tasks that can be and free up the people to be able to interact with human connections, to talk on the phone and have live engaging conversations. really build value that way. And so any way that we can automate these types of activities, we're focused on doing so. So when we look at, which listings can we automate the opportunities to? Obviously, cell phone numbers are the easiest. We automate all the cell phone numbers that are available, given that we don't suspect that it is a car dealer, given that there's no flags that indicate such. We're automating those activities. So it is a huge lift, and it isn't limited to just the initial message, right? We're also sending out a non-responder. So if we don't get a response, which we do get a response on most outbound, but in the event that we don't, we have a non-responder that goes out. And really where we see the most value in terms of converting to acquisitions is in follow-up. Follow-up is the most critical aspect of somebody that is going from acquiring at a 1% rate or less up to 3, 4, or 5 is done in follow-up. Now, we're not dropping any kind of voicemails or doing the human connections, but we are automating follow-up. We could do 2 or 3 or 4 times, and the dealer gets to control the days that it goes out. So we're going to send out that initial one on day 1. That non-responder can go out in whatever period, day 3 or 4. And the follow-up can be sequenced to the preference of the dealership. So it saves a lot of time by being able to automate these activities and get and have the consistency that it will be delivered.
I love all of that. I think that just about everybody does not place enough value on time, saying yes to the right stuff and no to the right stuff. I'm curious to know on this, maybe as a secondary question or a follow-up to this, when dealers are approaching that moment where they realize van makes all the sense in the world, like it solves a lot of problems, is it very frequent that they already realize I need to save time, I need this time savings piece, or is it more of the fundamental stuff of just we need to have a private vehicle acquisition? I guess my main question in this is, do you guys end up helping the dealership realize that one of the biggest pieces of value is actually time savings through automation and all of how the technology benefits them? Or did they see that as they kind of learn? Because everyone always gets educated about a business or a service or a solution before they say, okay, let's go under contract. I want to work with you. And there's always a handful of things, and it may be slightly different for each dealer, but I can only imagine that if they don't see it on the front end, that ends up being a very huge, substantial piece of value for you to deliver to the dealer, because time allows them to not just save the minutes, but time savings also it's almost always in business associated with cost savings or driving profits higher. So I guess my question is, did dealers typically ever come in and saying, I think this is going to save a lot of time and I see how that benefits my business? Or is it kind of the core pieces and then you guys get to help emphasize the time savings is also, you're going to love it?
Well, Sean, the old saying, time is money, and it truly is. So I'm going to go back to the story on why I founded Van. So I was a used car manager at a store outside of Chicago, and I was a vAuto dealer. And I was struggling to buy cars in the range that vAuto suggested. So here's the band of what I should pay for the car. I go to the auction, I'd have to pay way over that to get it back. So it was that was one point. The second was, Dale Pollock was talking a lot about reducing the average cost of investment, right? And so it was bringing down the average cost. So it was the challenge that I had of buying cars in the price range that vAuto suggested and finding cars that were at a lower price point. So for me, as the used car manager at a store, I started wondering, like, where can I find these cars? Which led me to private sellers, which led me to the frustrating experience that I had of running the same searches every day, messaging sellers, not knowing who I messaged, not knowing who was coming in, not knowing what offers I had made, and trying to organize these activities. So for me, as the used car manager, the challenge that I had was my time, right? And so I needed to buy cars. I needed those cars to be profitable, and I needed to do so in a way that was an efficient use of my time. So the answer that I had was to automate the aggregation, so the searching, and automate the engagement. Those two things must go hand in hand. If I automated the aggregation and I had the list, I still needed to then send out those messages. But what I preferred was for those messages to be automated and for me to get the responses and then engage with those responses. So that I could deal with. If a seller was calling me, I'd have the chance to answer that call. In our case now, we have a call whisperer that says, as the call's coming in, this is a van call on a 2014 Jeep Cherokee. So if I was either a sales manager, a BDC, or a salesperson, I'd be able to shift gears from my typical introduction to the introduction that would be focused on buying that Jeep Cherokee. And so when you ask the question of time, yeah, time is money. And the reason time is money isn't limited to just what am I saving in my time that I would have to pay somebody else to do. That's one aspect. The second, I would argue, is that it's consistent. It doesn't miss. It sends out. There aren't really dropped balls that happen that I was busy, I was on vacation, I was sick. No, it happens. The messages get delivered. So time is money in the one aspect of it replaces somebody having to do it. But time is money also because it gets done. It doesn't get dropped. So from those two aspects, time is money.
Yeah, I just love that component when you started to kind of share and dig in on the automation piece. I just, kind of put myself in the shoes at the dealership and think, wow, that alone is just so valuable. It just really kind of makes an impact there. I'm curious, and maybe there's some based on this question that you can think of that are related to that. They don't have to be, but you talked about the Infinity dealership example, and I love the stories of your own journey. I think that everyone that tunes in and listens to your subject matter expertise on this probably really deeply appreciates the fact that you're coming from a place of you had a problem doing the exact same thing that who you sell to probably have experienced, and you made a solution for it. But next question, though, is around any other success stories that kind of illustrate the financial impact of using the van platform in conjunction with this partnership with Profit Time.
Well, Sean, I'm going to go a little bit above that just to be a little bit broader on the success of using Van. We have an independent store that we work pretty closely with located in the state of Washington. And I'm really impressed by the execution of the details, the execution of the workflow, the execution of the process. And this dealer is well dialed in. They don't go to the auction, period. They do not go to the auction. They buy about 60 to 70 cars a month off the street. And as I was sharing with you earlier, I don't remember the exact dollar amount per car, but I know it's somewhere between $3,000 and $4,000 per vehicle that they acquire, and then retail, of course. The margins that they have of not going to the auction allows them a couple advantages. Number one, they're more profitable, and they're able. Obviously, the bottom line shows it. Two is that the cars that they're buying, they're not at the auction. Not just that one car, but cars like it. I referenced earlier the lower price point cars and the need to drive down the average cost of investment. This is also a priority for this store because they average about $30,000 for their average vehicle. Now, you may say an independent store that's averaging a cost or a retail price for $30,000. They offer really good stuff, nice cars. And by bringing down their average cost of inventory, this will allow them to sell more cars because they can reach a broader audience, which could afford a lower price point vehicle more so than a $50,000 or $60,000 vehicle. But not needing to go to the auction and having a very sustainable supply of high margin and fast turning. And these are fast turning cars because they're not at the auction. These kinds of vehicles, they don't make it there. And that was the other experience that I had when I was doing it, was the cars that may be desirable. I would have to ask, why is that nice car at the auction? Did that not pass somebody's inspection and trying to get passed over to me? I didn't want it. So the dealer that I'm sharing, located in the state of Washington, they do a fantastic job buying 60 to 70 cars per month and making high margin and fast turning cars.
That's fascinating. And I love the state of Washington since I was born and raised there. I did not know that you guys were working with somebody that was independent that's having success like that. I think that's also really important for people to tune into because that's also a big part of the industry. And boy, 60 to 70 acquisitions a month. That's impressive.
consistently.
Yeah,
Consistently.
that's
Well,
that's
Sean,
impressive.
you're touching on the independents, and I had overlooked kind of the significant need that independents have often over franchise dealers to source from the private party. And about 2 weeks ago, I was talking to a large auto group which has a specific brand just for used inventory.
Hmm.
And the executive that I was speaking to said, you know what, this would be really good for our independent only franchise. And he shared with me something that I knew but had kind of overlooked. And that's the reality that franchise dealers, they have a flow of really nice trade-ins, right? They have the Toyota, the Honda franchise in the building. Inherently, they're going to get really nice trades. Now, an independent dealer, they're trades, but since they're on used cars, they're the second tier down. So the chances of an independent store getting equal trade-ins to a franchise dealer, it rarely happens. In fact, I would say it doesn't really happen all that often.
Mm-hmm.
So the need for an independent to source really high quality, good cars is heightened for an independent dealer, and sourcing from the street or private party is a great way for them to acquire really nice stuff.
That's a great point. And within independence too, I, I can't think of a better word than there's levels of sophistication. Like some of them have a lot of technology, some of them use a lot because they're the type of inventory that they keep. This example that you're just sharing with this independent in Washington, when you're keeping product that's premium, you are also probably using tools that are similar, if not identical, to what some of your counterparts on the franchise new part of the industry use. I think it's very interesting for independents to realize that there are all kinds of tools like the one that you've developed that will help them almost no matter what level of sophistication they want to be at, because there can be a significant drop off within the independent world of things that they may feel they want to utilize. But because van is so integral in the kind of the lifeblood of the business, which is inventory and where we're going to acquire it from, and do we want to make some of these improvements in terms of how much, if we even need to go to the auction at all. And then I love the fact that you shared a little bit of this on our first conversation, but it's come up a couple times here. It has to matter for you as an independent or as a franchise dealer that a tool like Van brings in the opportunity for you to set up this criteria of the vehicles that you're looking for, many of which you never ever make it to the auction. And it opens up opportunities for you to really get, I think, more specific in how you're going to go about keeping your inventory the way you really want it and moving the vehicles you want. And then you bring in the partnership with vAuto and Profit Time GPS. It just seems to maximize everything to a level that it's almost a no-brainer as to why you wouldn't want to do this if you're really serious about what you're doing in the used car part of your business.
And I was
Yeah.
talking to a partner today, and he shared with me a few examples that they had acquired cars from sellers that were customers of theirs. And so he was describing a few that they actually had in their database. And as a
Mm.
result of acquiring those cars, they were able to keep not only that car captive within the same dealership, but also the seller, right? So they could have repeat business that could be cultivated. Now, I mean, one aspect would be maybe they're reaching out to them from the service drive, but the examples that he shared, they didn't have recent service business, but we
Mm.
happen to automate the engagement to those sellers to bring that back in and still capture those cars, and more importantly, capturing those sellers, which are customers.
Yeah, very important. Love all these examples. I want to talk a little bit or ask you a little bit about support and training. I know there's always dealers who are interested in the end results, but they maybe gloss over or they go move too fast when considering if they're going to be supported and if there's training. And you touched on this the first conversation we had about this, and I'd love for you to share a little bit more about how you guys offered your training and support to dealers so that they're maximizing the benefits of both van and then also in contextually with the partnership with Profit Time GPS?
Yeah. So we have acquisition coaches, and these are coaches that have experience buying cars from consumers. And in fact, some of them are actively buying today. So we have a few that are still buying either for one of our dealers in the evening hours part time, or they do it on their own and flip cars. But these are individuals that have firsthand experience of knowing what it's like to work in a dealer, knowing what it's like to make offers and feel the pain that our customers feel. In fact, we even have our product manager. We actually have had him operate as a buyer to feel the pain firsthand so that we can make sure that our product is evolving through the lens of our customers. So our coaches are fantastic at the execution of the strategy of buying cars from consumers. And we can also help dealers to document their process. This is something that I spoke on at some shows last year, was the criticalness of actually documenting what a dealer does. So documenting what the strategy is. Do we make specific offers? Do we provide ranges? If we do, what technology we are using? What is the word track? What do we do for payoffs? Now, some of this may be common sense, like we can just talk about it. But what we often see is a big divide if a dealer wants to hire multiple buyers. And by our coaches guiding these dealers through documenting what they do, it allows for scale. It allows for scale and consistency. They can stay consistent as they're adding team members. Also, if there is a drop off with any of the conversions, perhaps the conversion from the contact to appointment is low. Perhaps if the conversion from the show to acquisition is low, we can identify where a dealer has the biggest margin of improvement, and we can identify what the user is doing and then compare it to what was written down. Are we doing the things that we said we would do? And if we are off track, kind of why? And our coaches are able to engage with our dealers on a weekly basis or on a monthly basis. We start off weekly. We want to make sure that our dealers get a great onboarding experience and they're able to see success very soon, and then eventually segue to a monthly engagement. But I think everybody needs a coach. So I have a coach. I have a couple coaches, and I know for myself, somebody to hold me accountable to the things that I say that I'm going to do. Did I do it? And if I didn't, I want somebody to come and point that out. Hey, you said you were going to do this. Did you actually do it? And if I didn't, I have to answer to why I may not have done something that I would do. Or perhaps there's blind spots that I can learn something from somebody else that has done the job that I seek to do, or to get better at a job that they're already great at. And this is what our coaches offer. They offer the ability for a user or a dealer to accelerate their learning of buying cars off the street. And it's no secret that this is a challenging space. When you're dealing with the consumers, success is 5%. Success is 5%. So you consider what a dealer does in any given department. There isn't an area that has a higher level of rejection than the buy center. So if you're doing something that inherently has a lot more no's than anything else is done in the business, right? Having a coach there that can say, hey, that's a good job. Like, you got 4%, you just started doing it. That's great.
Yeah.
And having somebody to help, hey, you want to get to 5%? Let's show you how. Let's focus on this aspect. We'll check back in next week and we'll see if you did those things. And if not, let's work on improving that. And our coaches have the experience to be able to guide a dealer to achieve the level of success that they're seeking.
I think that support and training are unfortunately not emphasized, prioritized enough when new products and services are brought into dealerships. So it's always great to hear companies that are so committed to that point, because you're ensuring, at least you're doing everything you can to make sure that you ensure that your dealer customers are getting the maximum value of the service. And in the beginning, sometimes it takes a little bit of that, the coaching. Some people would say, like, kind of holding my hand or hand holding. It's not even so much, just the hand holding. It's everything that you just said. People that have experience, people that which is the greatest differentiator. Somebody that's done this, they get it. And if that person is assigned to me as a dealer who has signed up for this service, and now I have this comfort, I have this reassurance, I have a confidence that builds, that I don't have to think, well, how many weeks, how many months, how long am I going to have to be doing this all by myself, trying to figure it out with all the other things we have going on in the world. I think it's really critical, and it's awesome. Kudos to you guys that you actually make that something that is so valuable and important from day one, so that people know that you're committed to their success. Training and support does that. When you're there for people to make sure that it's going to go right, that's committed to your client's success. And I think it's fantastic. It makes me want to circle back around and ask you again, because I think as people are consuming these episodes and listening to you share about it, I know some people will come all the way around and maybe think, okay, so how does Van's technology help my dealership? Like, how does it help me with acquiring, top quality vehicles? I know it's the basic, but as people sit and listen to all of these examples, I think some of them are like, okay, again, just give me the basics. So I know it sounds weird as we get closer to the end of this interview, but I'm curious to know, will you just share with the audience the basics? How does Vance Tech help connect dealerships directly with these sellers of these cars?
Yeah, Sean, thanks. I want to touch on one thing before I jump over to that. And
Yeah,
as you were
sure.
talking about coaches, the one thing that resonated that did want to point out is with the partnership with vAuto, our coaches are able to strategize along with the performance managers. And so since we have a very tight relationship, we're able to actually strategize together. And so if we feel that one of the biggest opportunities is really to right size the offer. So in other words, if there's a common perception is nothing is lost. So if they don't win that car, there's nothing lost, right? It wasn't a trade, which there is something lost where you may lose the retail deal if you don't offer enough for the trade-in, right? There's a tangible loss on that. Now on the street buying side, if we offer 80 or 85% for a car, but at the auction we're willing to offer 97% for the same car, you may be able to ask the question, why is the strategy 82% or 83% for cars that you would pay 10% more at the auction? We could at least call that out and identify if it does align with the dealer strategy. If it does, that's great. We're all on the same page. If it doesn't, where you have this divide between the people doing the job and perhaps some of the senior executives that have a different perception, we want to make sure we call things out and we're aligned between the buyer, our coaches, the performance manager, and the executives at the dealership. So, all right, now, Sean, you had asked, what are some more basic functionality on how a dealer can benefit from using Van? And so the simple answer is to buy cars at higher margins, so you make higher profits efficiently. And how we go about doing this is we are going to align the market of a dealer. So given the search, they get to define whatever cars they want in the search. And then we're going to help them to acquire that through automation of vehicles in their market, which again are cars that have typically their unique inventory that they're not going to find at the auction. And they're able to acquire this inventory on their own terms. On the last session I spoke about the excitement at the auction, where if you're bidding on cars, you're bidding on cars. In some cases, you can get kind of wrapped into that, where you might say, fine, I'll go another 500. And if you're buying cars from consumers, you're typically doing so on your own terms. You're doing so in your backyard, in your playground. You're on your own your home field. So by doing so, you have the ability to make smarter offers, smarter purchases. And in fact, we have some dealers that will run it through a brief inspection to have a better sense of what they're actually buying before they commit to giving that consumer a check. That's just a safeguard that allows them to make sure that they're buying a vehicle that is understood to what they're actually buying. And it doesn't cost an additional fee to have the ability to arbitrate like an auction may charge. You don't have to pay that because the consumer is there and you can have it inspected on the premises. So we help dealers to acquire better inventory, higher margins that help them to sell, or that rather they're going to sell quickly because of this unique product.
And I know you guys, I'd like you to speak a little bit to the additional tools and resources. You guys have you make content, but a lot of tools and resources available to your dealers to help them, I think, in all aspects, whether it's development of longer term relationships with sellers, but there are a lot of things that you guys do. And I was hoping that you would speak a little bit to some of those tools and resources that you guys provide that maybe people are not as familiar with.
We offer quite a bit of additional tools and resources. So if you're looking for like features relating to efficiencies, we have the ability to push and connect to existing tools. So that would consist of vAuto, Carfax, AutoCheck, their primary CRM. That would also be features like plate to VIN, where dealers almost always want the VIN for that car. So they can check the Carfax report. They can also obtain an accurate value knowing the specific features. And we have embedded a plate to VIN functionality that they can see the plate, they can enter the plate in there right within VAN, processes and returns the VIN. And if the AutoCheck or Carfax is already integrated, it'll automatically process it and make that report available. So we offer an increasing amount of features and functionality. I mentioned about our product manager, being a buyer firsthand. And that experience has been fantastic for us and our dealers because we're rapidly rolling out new functionality every single week. Every week we're dropping new enhancements, new products, and we have recently deployed new enhanced reporting, which will really disclose how specific users are doing with which sellers are they engaging with, what's their average response time, what's their average appointments, close rate, and so on. So the enhanced reporting has been a huge improvement to our platform that was lacking for quite some time, and I'm thrilled that we have it available now.
Yeah, that's excellent. Well, listen, we've already got ourselves kind of to the end of yet another fantastic interview with a lot of great insights. I think that dealers will really appreciate learning a little bit more about what that partnership between Van and vAuto's Profit Time GPS really kind of means. There's so many different layers that you spoke to that make a lot of sense for people from the data perspective, from pricing optimization. You were talking about strategy action at the beginning of the episode, which I think is really, really critical. People being able to get the highest level of return on their investment, the optimization around pricing and improving the acquisition efforts when this is something near and dear to your dealership. It seems like the type of content you're sharing with people are really helping them. One, if they're already customers, great. This is going to be more of I guess, the confirmation that they're doing things right. But for people who are really trying to figure out things that they might need to change or new things that need to be brought into their business that will both help them improve profits while actually lowering costs. There's a whole bunch of that in the information that you're sharing in these episodes. So I appreciate it. I'll give you the last final word in case there's anything that you wanted to get off your chest before we conclude this episode.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. The primary thing I want to focus on really is, as I highlighted earlier, about the insights that the partnership between Van and vAuto permit is something that has never been available before. And overlaying the insights from vAuto on top of the private seller market and being able to automate the engagement to sellers has been profound. And we're excited to have the opportunity to partner with an incredible company like vAuto.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's just so many good things that you guys are doing, and obviously vAuto and that partnership makes it so much more rich for the dealers. I appreciate you taking more time to talk about this. I think that all of the audience that either consumes the short form or they end up enjoying the full breadth and depth of these interviews are are coming away more equipped with information that is a little deeper. We go beyond the surface level. So I appreciate you taking the time, Tom. I know the audience probably really is eating up this knowledge. So thank you, and I can't wait to do it again.
Great. Thanks, John.